Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Thrive and Prosper podcast. I'm your host, Zach Ritchie, and for this episode, we're actually going to shift a little bit from our traditional lecture style to more of a case study of a business owner who used their own creativity to work around, any kind of obstacles holding them back from their potential. So please welcome to our hot seat here the owner of Drip Revenue himself, the one and only Phil Steptoe. Phil, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Zach, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent, excellent. So we're really going to take a focus today on the journey of the entrepreneur and really, what it takes, the stones that it takes to really step out on your own and be the entrepreneur that you want to be. And so I want to start by kind of bringing the audience up to speed here and really talking about that journey. So walk us through kind of the pre-era before we got to where you are now as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, sure. Again, thanks for having me. So, I've always been quote unquote bitten by the bug to say, of entrepreneurship. I just didn't realize it until I was older. So I have, memories going back to 5 or 6 years old. I had a friend that lived over in Virginia, and his family lived on a golf course, and we would take his father's golf cart out through the woods onto the course, and we would go out onto the rough and the sand traps and the water hazards. And if you don't play golf, it's basically the areas where you're not supposed to put the ball. And we would go out and collect the golf balls, and we would take them to the cleaning machines on the course, and we would sell them. We'd set up a little table, and we would sell them for half price of whatever the price was in the clubhouse.
Wow.
And that worked. Yeah, that worked. And we would, make like, $100 a day doing that until security would come and throw us off the course. So, seriously, when I seriously got into entrepreneurship was actually in college. And that was pretty much out of necessity originally. So I was going to Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia, and I was originally pursuing pre-med. When I first went to college, I wanted to go into pre-med. I had this idea of eventually pursuing anesthesiology, and that quickly went down the tubes once I took my first biology class, Bio 121, and I said, yeah, I don't think so. I think I'll figure something else out. So then I actually headed into kind of going the pre-law direction. And I come from a long line of attorneys. My great-grandfather actually was the founder of Steptoe and Johnson, which is a very large international law firm, offices all over the world. And, my father was an attorney and actually later became a judge. I got to just about my junior year at Marshall, and I realized that I was at risk of losing my financial aid. I've always been kind of hesitant with student loans. I just was naturally kind of concerned with them and fearful of them because, you hear so many horror stories with student loans, and especially my sister went to become a doctor. And, when I was heading the pre-med direction, I found a ton of nightmare stories there of people with medical school debt that was in the 6 and 7 figures at a interest rate that is it raises my blood pressure, and I don't even know the money. I'll put it that way. So I was pretty much determined by any means necessary to not have that happen.
Understood.
So what ended up happening was at the time I was a security guard. I was actually working at an abandoned rail yard facility in Huntington, and I was working the night shift. And I kid you not, if there's a second location on the planet that's as close to Chernobyl environment wise as you can get, this was it. This place was closed down in the 80s. The coats are still on the racks. The lunch boxes are still there. It's like a frozen in time. And there was just wild animals in all of the rail yard buildings, and you would shine, I'd shine my spotlight, and there'd just be eyes in the dark. It was a creepy place to work.
That sound like you couldn't pay me enough to go there as a haunted house attraction, much less that's the 9 to 5 gig. That sounds terrifying.
So, there wasn't any reception inside of these buildings, these rail yard buildings. So, yeah, it's like if I got into a bad situation, I couldn't have called anybody. It was a creepy work environment. But the silver lining there, Zach, was that I was allowed to bring my laptop and have my phone. And so I basically could use that time to start to learn, some of the advertising and marketing stuff that I ended up getting into and where I've spent almost the past 10 years. So I was able to basically get paid to learn. So both of the first business ideas that I had failed. they flopped. And that was pretty much the first 2 years of my journey was failure after failure. And so I was kind of failing forward, so to speak. I was just kind of, trying things. I always had the goal of keeping things lean when starting businesses. So when I started my first one, my first one was a forum website that basically I was trying to create a competitor to Reddit, and I had no idea at the time that was going to be. It was way higher of a mountain to climb than I had originally given credit for. But I started a forum that basically what it was people could share different cool things that they had found online, different websites that they either owned or websites that they had found, and they would be incentivized for that. And what we could do is, we were eventually going to try to plug in so that businesses, would give like discounts to different businesses. And that idea kind of flopped. And then we kind of went the AdSense route. So we were using ads on the site, and then AdSense considered it to be an incentivized website that kind of incentivized clicking. So we ended up getting banned from AdSense. So yeah, that business failed after like a year and a half. Luckily, I didn't have too much in it. Again, like I said, I try to keep things pretty lean. And then that led me on to Amazon Kindle. So I actually when I was researching lean business, opportunities online. One thing that I came across was Kindle businesses, and this was back in 2013. The problem with that was that I didn't understand at the time that, to have a successful Kindle business on Amazon, it requires a good amount of research and a good pipeline for the actual production of the content. If you do not have the funds to hire like a ghostwriter or something, you better love to write. I'll put it that way. I remember at one point I was trying to pump out one nonfiction book per day. And it was like random topic that I would find that I would consider to have a high opportunity of keyword search volume. So that was a brutal learning experience. I think in the 3 or 4 books that I launched, I might have made $100 or something like that. So that didn't work. So around that time, I'm still trying to kind of figure out this Amazon model. And, I'm trying to think of things. Okay, so what have I tried? What were my strengths? What were my weaknesses? Okay, I couldn't monetize the first business that I had, but I grew the user count. I was able to get users. I was able to grow my audience, and so I thought, I was pretty good on the advertising side for being restricted on advertising funds. When I got started, I didn't have really any money outside of what was left from my paycheck to pump into these ideas. So yeah, I was like, what was I good at? So the advertising side. So I was in a fraternity, Sigma Tau Gamma at Marshall, and I was on the front porch of the fraternity house. I was talking to one of the fraternity brothers, and he was saying, my brother actually is involved in ebooks, and he's making 6 figures a year. And I was like, give me his phone number. I was like, give me his phone number. I by any means. I ended up talking with this guy a little bit, and he is actually in the he's in the marketing space, and specifically digital marketing and traffic generation strategies. And I'm like, this is perfect. This is exactly what I was thinking of a direction that I could go with my ebooks. And this was on Amazon. This was before I even got to this point. So I start putting together a traffic generation guide on how I was able to get that kind of traffic to my Reddit competitor website.
Right.
And so I actually put out this video series, and it was like 17 minutes long. I remember I had this terrible microphone. I had this terrible picture of me wearing a suit on that the shirt wasn't ironed. I had a baseball cap on. I looked pretty awkward. So I was like awkwardly trying to fit into like looking like it was, coming from a professional
right.
angle,
No, of course.
being B2B. So it was pretty funny on that end, but I used the strategies that this guy told me about. And I was like, I don't see how this is going to work. I was like, I remember having to borrow the money from my dad to actually launch this strategy to get traffic to this traffic generation video series that I had created. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm doing what most guys in college age do. I'm sitting there and I'm playing video games, watching TV, and I get a notification on my phone. There's a sale on PayPal, and I'm like, and that's like insane to me, because it made it real. All of a sudden, all of this time, these 2 years of struggle, these 2 years of putting the work in, but not seeing the benefits of the work, and seeing sales and things like that. all of a sudden it became super real. So of course, I call my parents and I say, I'm going to write one of these books every day for the rest of my life. Now, and it's just unrealistic, of course, but I became super motivated. So,
Right.
The first day goes by and I've made like $300 in sales. And I'm like, this is crazy. And it was like, this is, to me, $300 at that time was like 3,000. I remember I fell asleep on the couch in my apartment and I had this old Android phone, and I remember having it next to me on the couch, and I remember waking up in the middle of the night and my phone's dead, and I'm like, oh great, all this money that I just made from selling this video series, I'm gonna have to go spend on a new phone.
Right. Yeah. The profits are already out the window.
Yeah. And so I plugged the phone in hoping that it's just a dead battery. And I'm right, it's a dead battery. So I turned the phone on and I checked my email, and there's hundreds of PayPal notifications of sales. And I almost get panicky because I'm like, what has happened? Has this taken off so quickly almost too quickly?
Right.
And I end up finding out that a major, like a B2B info marketing website picked this up and put us as product of the day. I didn't even mean to. I was just trying to figure out how to do all of this, and we get picked up as product of the day. And so there's like $15,000 of sales in my PayPal account. And I get a call from PayPal and they're like, hey, what's going on here? Because
is everything all right? This seems a little too successful.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm thinking, oh boy, I'm going to have to go through and like provide all these documents and all this. And I don't know. I'm feel pretty overwhelmed. And they're like, oh, well, congratulations. And they just hung up, and I was like, okay. I finally get these funds into my bank account. And this is like, that's like the most amount of money I had ever had. And so that was, at that point, that was the point of no return for me. Yeah. From there, I kind of ventured on to rinsing and repeating that. I had some other stuff in the info marketing space that I did. I later went on to e-commerce and did very well there. I've done a little bit in affiliate marketing as an agency, which that's what we are today. So
right.
That's kind of pushed me up to I have the agency stuff. We're growing that. We're currently, we have a focus in search advertising. So that's Google ads and Microsoft ads. We serve clients all over the world. We actually do that on a CPA basis. So if you don't know what that means, basically, when you think of an ad agency, and I'm sure that anybody that's trying to start a startup or is a business owner can relate to getting blasted with calls from ad agencies of, hey, let us manage your Facebook stuff for $500 a month.
Right.
That's a tough model to pursue, especially when I was so young, and I tried to do that stuff locally, and I got laughed out of businesses trying that because they're like, oh, you're 20 years old and we're not giving you our money. We don't know who you are. So, what I figured out was, hey, what if I only charge them when I generate a result? Then the interests are aligned. And so when I started doing that, then I almost got no no's. And it was pretty much solid yeses. And now, of course, we work with a middleman. You could basically call them a broker that they have those relationships, and they just come to us for traffic generation and lead generation. So business is pretty automated, and we're still scaling that out. So,
and I'm sure with the advent of like AI and things like that, I'm sure that's helping out, what the systems in place and all that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say, first of all, amazing story in terms of how we get to this point. And for me, listening to it, the immediate lesson that I'm seeing pop up here is the real commitment to being an entrepreneur, regardless of what form that takes. The fact that college did not work out exactly the way that you had planned initially, and then that pivots into really becoming an entrepreneur and pursuing that initial push that you've always had, as when you were selling golf balls on the cheap as a kid or what have you.
Yeah.
And really just not taking that no. And I think for a lot of business owners, as soon as something comes up not as the success that you want, I think sometimes business owners don't want to let that go. And the fact that you even though you were young, were starting out with businesses that you were attempting and that they didn't work out, that you had the wherewithal to go, okay, how do I pivot from this? How do I take the lessons that I've learned here on not being a success yet and turning it into something that I can be more successful with? That is a huge, huge stepping stone that I think some business owners miss.
I appreciate that. Yeah. So I think that it takes me into with entrepreneurship, you have to expect to fail. it is normal to fail. Think of the first 2 years of my journey, I didn't make a dime.
Right.
It was failure after failure. People would ask me, and they would joke, in my fraternity house, they would joke with me. And at the time I had a couple extra pounds on me. They would say things like I was fat Steve Jobs or something like that.
Oh.
Just spoken in pride, and it was all
Thanks,
good
fellas.
fun,
Super appreciate that. That's really building the confidence up.
Yeah. When you're getting started, you have to expect to fail. To have a success right out of the gate is actually abnormal. So if you're failing, you're going through the normal ups and downs of that journey. I think another thing that catches people off guard as well is, entrepreneurship can be a lonely road to walk. And I don't mean physically lonely. You can have friends around you, but people sometimes don't give credit that it's hard for people who are not entrepreneurs to understand entrepreneurs. And it is hard for family to understand you as an entrepreneur if you don't come from an entrepreneurial family. So you just have to know that and to understand that people say things like, oh, I don't think you should do that. I don't think that's going to work. They're only saying that to you because that's what they know. They're conditioned to, oh, well, I need to go the college route. I need to stick with a 9-to-5. That's safety to me.
Yeah.
And so you have to understand that and understand it's not necessarily that people are trying to tear you down.
Right.
People can only give you advice based on what they know. What's their reality, what's their experience. So I think that the bottom line is stay on the road and you will get somewhere.
That's amazing. Thank you for that. But also, so a question I've got for you. So basically, it seems like in your story, you have always been an idea guy. That like from the jump, you've been able to come up with an idea and develop it over time. But that kind of endurance and idea is not enough necessarily to successfully launch a business. Unfortunately, funding does become a factor somewhere down the line.
Yes.
Now, obviously, you were smart to stay online to start with, but eventually, as you pointed out with, how you're growing your current business, funding does come into play.
Yes.
So I want you to walk us through funding in general. What were some of the things that you were dealing with or some of the things that you experienced?
When I first got started, I got started when I was basically 18, 19 years old. So securing funding, I didn't have credit history.
Right.
And there weren't a lot of these opportunities like we have nowadays for these startup, like Chase has a card now for people that don't have credit history to build credit history. So it was very challenging for me to get funding. And I was pretty much, I had no opportunity to get any kind of standard funding, bank, lenders, credit cards, things like that, when I first got started because of that. So I was pretty much limited to, Dad, can I borrow $100? I'm confident this time that it's going to work. And, there was a few episodes of that.
Right.
But, it would have been very, very helpful for me in the beginning, especially from an ad spend perspective. So the way that we work as a CPA-based agency is we only make money we only win if the client wins.
Right.
All the risk is on me. And that's part of why it's been successful is because it's not the risk of, hey, pay us $2,000 a month. And whether that $2,000 a month even gets them a return is totally up in the air. So the downside of that, of course, for us is a cash flow problem. So that restricted me from actually getting into the advertising side. I was pretty limited and stuck with the info marketing stuff until I could build up enough capital to feel comfortable. And even when I had the capital, I kept it lean. So again, funding would have been very helpful to have. Fast forwarding to where I am today. So, the strategies that we've used with specifically with Fund&Grow and funding are I have nearly 6 years of experience in investing. And the past few years of that, I've kind of been including trading in that as well. So, I originally, when I first found Fund&Grow was actually when I was trying to learn real estate investing. When I had made this money from the successful advertising business, I was like, well, what do I do with it?
Right.
So I started to discover real estate investing, and one of the YouTube channels, I can't remember which one, had recommended Fund&Grow. And I looked it up and I thought, wow, this is really interesting, and I still, I was still discovering real estate investing. That was kind of where I got started in my investing journey, but I was still kind of, should I, how do I do this? So I pay cash for the properties, or do I use leverage? And fast forward years later, and I am a real estate investor. I do have experience with investing in property, and the current situation that I'm in. We live in southwestern part of the state of West Virginia. So my wife and I have a family property. We have an estate overlooking, it's on the top of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Literally, my family used to own a portion of the Appalachian Trail.
That's incredible.
That kind of limited me of, knowing that I'm going to, we want to relocate here in a few years of, do I really want to own property and be far away from it? So I started to venture into other investing options. So I tried, of course, stocks, equities, building portfolios for all the different portfolio theory, all that kind of stuff. And that led me to where I am today. I went through, just like I think most investors do who deal with stocks, they can relate to, the drawdowns, the bad times. That's where you really get to test yourself as an investor, is when it's not going so well. So I didn't like that. I didn't. I think most people have a hard time with that. And I thought, surely there has to be a way for me to have returns or even beat these returns while not having this drawdown risk. I don't like going to bed at night and worrying about, is there going to be, God forbid, is there going to be a war in the Middle East? Is the Fed going to come out and say something that is the stock market doesn't like? And I wake up the next day and it's down 5-10+%. So, very quickly I realized with that, okay, I can't implement any kind of leverage or funding into that business, because if I'm down 50% on my investment and I need to extend out my 0% credit, doing that, am I really going to want to sell while I'm down 50 or 60%?
Right. Ideally, no.
Right. Yeah. So that became a challenge there. And then I thought about, okay, back to the real estate thing. I kind of bounced back and forth between those two for a while. And I thought, okay, well, I don't have any experience in flipping. So I was a little hesitant. Okay, what happens if I use funding, I buy a property, and then, I run into a problem, God forbid the inspection misses something. I can turn it into a rental in the meantime. But, with the strategy, I was a little hesitant of, what happens if this goes sideways for a little bit and I start to actually tick into my interest rate, my APR. So, and of course, we want to avoid that. And you guys have been great for walking us through that strategy. So that kind of led me to where I am today of, eventually I found that trading was that avenue for me. That was the way that I could most successfully utilize leverage and utilize credit to further my wealth building goals. And when I bought my house in 2018, I just wrote a check and bought the house. And a lot of people, came and gave me a pat on the back. Wow, that's amazing.
Right.
And then I talked to a friend of mine and he was like, that was stupid. He was like, why did you do that? Because the rates were 3%. And I read this book called The Value of Debt in Building Wealth. Utilizing non-consumer debt responsibly is a game changer. And I actually came from at the time that I bought the house, I was kind of like on the Dave Ramsey bandwagon of, all debt is terrible.
Right.
And that couldn't be further from the truth. And so, going back, I've read this book and I've started to realize, okay, utilizing debt in some way, and where it starts in the book is he starts talking about, people that get a mortgage versus people that pay cash for their house, and the difference that it makes being invested, regardless of what it is, whether you're investing in another real estate, whether it's invested in just the S&P or whatever, the difference is millions and millions of dollars versus saving, maybe low six figures or on your interest over the lifetime of the loan. So I figure out that trading is the way for me to be able to have returns, to have these strong returns while being able to be in control of my drawdown exposure. And drawdown, for those of you that don't know what that means, it means the maximum amount of percentage that your portfolio could be down at any one time.
Right.
So if I have $100,000, I have a 20% drawdown, I have an $80,000 balance left of the value of my assets. So, as we saw during COVID, I think the stock market drew down like 30-some%. And of course, in 2008, it was a lot more than that. Trading is how I figured out, okay, I can be in control of the returns, but even more importantly to me, be in control of my risk. And so when I was able to plug funding into that, that was a real game changer to me because of the fact that it's liquid. And I know we were talking about this a little bit in the prep room, but my concern with funding as an investor, somebody that's moving into investing and trading full time is liquidity.
Right.
Liquidity is super important. If we do have an opportunity in the real estate market, I want to have access to my funds. I don't, if you see a lot of the time where there's an opportunity in the real estate market, like if you look at 2008, there was a lot of deals in 2010, 2011.
Very true.
But people's retirement accounts were down 50%, 60%. So were you really going to make a move there? Were you able to make a move? So I think that, again, funding was huge for me to be able to leverage that. And that's something that we luckily have been able to do with the help of Fund&Grow.
Well, and so perfect segue here. So for anyone listening who maybe they've got the business started, they're looking to expand their business, or like maybe you said, they're looking to create a little variety in their portfolio or what they're doing for business. Can you walk through just a little bit like what your experience is like with Fund&Grow, like how it was, for being someone who, let's be honest, you're self-made. You figured out a lot of, the obstacles in terms of the business that you wanted to pursue on your own, trial and error. So to have a team, like Fund&Grow to suddenly come in and help with a certain element of what you're dealing with as a business owner, what was that like? What was it like working with Fund&Grow?
It was amazing. I mean, it was so going kind of to go back off of what I had said about initially discovering Fund&Grow. I looked around for a few years of different business credit brokers, I guess. And, I kept getting these emails of guys like, hey, we can get you $500,000 of business line of credit. And I'm thinking, and I'd respond to it and be like, yeah, it's 100% APR. And I would be like, oh, okay. Yeah, I don't think that, that's a good, that's something I'd be interested in. So I was very hesitant to deal with those kind of companies for years. And I looked into Fund&Grow and was extremely impressed by the testimonials and the reviews that I saw, and just the customer service through the entire experience, even when we were just interested, was incredible. And you guys were very, very thorough. So yeah, we worked with Nicholas Wakely at Fund&Grow as our actual, our account manager.
Yes.
Through the funding process. And it was very, very simple. It actually kind of blew me away how simple the documentation requirements were. It was basically LLC docs and some other basic paperwork, ID, stuff like that, obviously, that is needed to obtain any kind of credit or dealing with any financial institution. And it's very straightforward. We went through with the check to make sure everything was good on our credit and everything was great there. And so we went right on to the applications process, and I thought the applications process was going to be like where we really kind of get into the back and forth, and it was a very straightforward, simple call. I remember the same day that we went through the first application, it was maybe an hour or two after I had the applications call with Nicholas that I get an email, boom, you're approved for $25,000 credit. And I was like, wow.
You're like, all right, these are the kind of emails I can live with.
Exactly. Yeah. So the entire process was just, it was amazing. So once we get the cards in the mail, and we're really excited, we want to utilize this credit. We want to start getting this to work in our trading and investment business. Run into a little bit of a hiccup, a little bit of a roadblock because of the industry that we're in, dealing with investments. It was a little bit challenging for us to find a service like a card to wire service where we could actually access the funds to apply to any investment strategy.
Right.
And we went through, I tried like 2 or 3 of them out on my own. I'm pretty good about working ahead. Sometimes ends up being a little bit of a drawback. I sometimes work too far ahead. So I went through and tried 2 or 3 of these things, and I got the same answer. Hey, we can't we can't allow your industry. And so I contacted Fund&Grow and I said, hey, I'm not able to utilize this credit. What do I do? I'm not sure if there's any backup strategies. And they said, no problem. We'll get you, we'll have somebody reach out to you. And Ryan Rundell from Customer Success reached out, and he was just incredible. I mean, I actually told my wife, I was like, I leave good reviews for businesses now and then. I try to help people where I can, but I was blown away. Like, I felt compelled after the experience with Ryan, because he cared so deeply about understanding that, we need to be able to use the credit and actually in order to get what we paid for. And he was really caring about that. And he assured me right out of the gate that, hey, we're going to find a workaround here, no matter what happens. And so he actually made a recommendation. The first recommendation he made worked, and we were able to utilize the credit. I can't get into the actual specifics of the trading strategies that we use, just because some of the trading strategies and investments that we hold is SEC regulation behind that. And there's certain rules, like you can't talk about the fund and the returns and things like that. And some of our other trading strategies, we have NDAs on with those partners. So, but we were able to utilize the credit. And thanks to Fund and Grow, we're looking at, by the time we actually scale up and get to where we want to be with Fund and Grow on our credit lines, we are going to be in an awesome place. I'll just put it to you that way. We're going to have a very large passive income stream that's tax advantaged, that is very risk minimal. So we're really thankful for the experience to work with Fund and Grow.
That's amazing. And again, in your case, and we talked about this a little before we started recording, was slightly unique.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't something just traditionally tangible. We've had plenty of clients who are in like more of a brick and mortar type scenario, and they're just like, oh, I just need money for X equipment. So the fact that you were able to be creative and work with Ryan and Nicholas to come up with solutions that, that additional income and is going to be, the fruits of that labor, really incredible, and super, super thrilled that, even in a unique business type setup and unique goals, we were still able to help funnel that. And I'm so thrilled for you and your business.
Yeah, isn't it fascinating how they have no problem? Most of them have no problem with a real estate investment, but if it's any other kind of investment, they're a little bit hesitant on some of that.
Yeah, suddenly the lenders get a little nervous when it's all the same. we're just investing.
It actually wasn't the lenders for me. It was the card to wire services that we used. And so they just, I guess, because what they're worried about is people saying something is an investment and they're really paying themselves something. So they're trying to pull cash off of a business card or pull cash off of a card and just use that. And hey, I'm going to go buy a car. So they don't want people to be doing that.
No, 100%. And actually, interesting thing that you mentioned that. So I myself was an account manager for many, many years. And in the early days, like in the caveman era of Fund and Grow 1,000 years ago, there was a time where people were attempting to use PayPal as sort of that like wiring middleman.
Yep.
And same exact thing, that people would go and try to just like, oh, I'm just going to pay myself. And PayPal will crack down so hard on that.
Yep.
For business owners across the board, that now it's literally just like, if you've got an eBay or, an online shop and you're just accepting payments, that's about the extent of it with PayPal. They've really zoomed in on what they want to be used for.
Yeah.
Again, thrilled that you were able to not only take this funding and really pursue how you wanted to pursue with it, but really just able to expand the business and the portfolio that you've got. That should be the goal of every business owner.
Yeah. And I think that, I fell in love with entrepreneurship, like I said, when I first started. I tried to build that first business, but I really have a strong passion for investing. What Fund and Grow has allowed us to do by being able to ratchet that up. Obviously, we don't use 100% of credit in our investing and in our trading. It's a portion, but it adds up. I really, fallen in love with investing and trading. And I think that as somebody that started as a business owner and went the route of being more an investor, I think that I was thinking about this last night, and I was thinking, I think most business owners want to be investors. They just don't know it yet.
Really?
Some people, are the more entrepreneur type. They love what they're doing. They want to build solutions.
Right.
But I think there's a portion of people like me who, I want freedom of time. I want to take care of my family. I want to improve my community. At some point in the future, maybe even get involved with certain political ideas that I believe are actually representing the American people. I want to improve things around me is the bottom line.
Right.
It's one of those things where, I think a lot of people that go into to business want that. They want that freedom of time. They want that freedom of not having to worry about the what ifs for their family. They want to travel. They want to pursue the things that they're actually passionate about.
Well, and so one thing I wanted to actually ask, because you'd brought up a really powerful statement earlier about true entrepreneurship can be a lonely path at times.
Yes.
You've made it through that tunnel. You're on the other side of it now. So for business owners or soon-to-be business owners who are looking at this road, how has focusing on being an entrepreneur really affected you and your family? Beyond just the nuts and bolts of business? How has it being an entrepreneur really affected the family?
This kind of question always takes me back to a specific, if you're talking about the success element. So the success that I of course, there's the obvious of the freedom of time, ability to travel, do things that we love. But I think that the success element, so, my purpose for entrepreneurship was more of the wealth building side, because I want to have an impact. All the things I want to do to have an impact. Hopefully in the next 10 years, my wife and I are looking to start a family foundation to help poor Appalachian children with education expenses and providing higher learning opportunities to them. And that's kind of a nod back to my situation of being forced into that situation. The success element and the wealth building of entrepreneurship and that journey, one of my mentors always told me that money just allows you to be more of who you are already. So if you are a charitable person, you're going to be charitable with your money. If you're a materialistic person, then if that makes you happy, then you're going to go that route. I think that it just allows you to live a purposeful, more fulfilling life. And that's entrepreneurship in general. I think just allows you to do that with the different opportunities that entrepreneurs have. And so I think that it's allowed me to be able to do what I want, live life by my own terms. And I'm really blessed that I got started early. That was the big thing for me. Not to discourage anybody. Technically the best time to plant a tree was yesterday. The second best time's today, right?
Right.
But I think that it's given me an opportunity with my kids. I just had my daughter, my first wife and I's first child was just born in January. And that's an very exciting thing for me, is I'm able to start teaching that next generation that there's another way.
Well, first of all, congratulations to you and your wife. That's amazing.
Thank you.
As another January baby to another one. So congrats there. But
thank you.
Speaking of that, and being kind of having everyone sit under your learning tree a little bit here, what are some practices that you learned along the way? What are some tips that you've got for people who want to become entrepreneurs, for those who maybe haven't started their business yet and want to? What are some ideas and some tips that people should know before getting into business, regardless of, whatever industry it might be?
Yeah. So my first piece of advice would be to read the E-Myth. If you're going from if you're strictly talking about an entrepreneurial perspective, the E-Myth, in my opinion, as a book, cannot be beaten, by Michael Gerber. And so when I read that book, it put everything into perspective for me. It told me the realities of being a business owner and approaching things as a business. And it talks about the kind of this fallacy of, examples of people. For example, somebody that loves to bake pies starts a pie shop and they wonder why the business fails, because they don't approach it as a business. They just enjoyed making pies. And there's nothing wrong with that. But you just have to understand to approach things from a business perspective and to look at things systematically, to build systems. And it really helps to understand, he talks about the technician, which is the doer, the person that's doing the actual work. And most people who think that they're entrepreneurs are actually technicians. And then it ties in talking about the managers, the people overseeing those technicians in the day-to-day of the business, and then the actual entrepreneurs, the people that are building the vision. So the E-Myth was profound. Talking about it from an investment perspective, going back to that, and specifically my experience with using credit to help further my goals. The best book I could recommend there, again, the last name is Anderson. I think it's Tony Anderson, maybe. It's The Value of Debt in Building Wealth. That's very profound, I think, as an investor, understanding responsible use of non-consumer, business debt, to help you to get to where you want to be. I think that those two books, depending on, whether you're talking entrepreneurship or whether you're talking more of investing and tying that into funding, are a great place to start. I think that my second piece of advice would be, do not skip the legal and the tax stuff. You're going to be focused on, how do I make money? I got to make money. I got bills due, and that's where everybody is. You're not alone in that. But you're going to have opportunities in the beginning to help set yourself up to build those, to help strengthen your business financially by saving on taxes, by working with a CPA or a tax professional. And that's something that, I think I see a lot of people that are like, they get into business and look at like an H&R Block or something. And they think, well,
Right.
I'm saving $5,000 or $6,000 a year, or a couple $1,000s a year by going to an H&R Block, instead of having to hire an actual, like a CPA or something. And then they realize later that they could have saved $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 on their tax bill by going to that CPA. So I think sometimes, that people overlook that, and that is a very important piece of advice that I would give, that gives you an edge for sure. And that goes into my next point is, third is try to find an edge or an advantage. So this ties back in when I was talking about the business, when I was testing businesses, my approach was, I want an edge. How do the generation that I came up in, I have the internet. The internet's like the Wild West, right? I mean, there's this endless frontier of opportunity on the internet. And so I was thinking of everything in regards to, how do I start a business for $500? What business can I start for $500 that has the ability to make $5,000 or more a month? And so I could afford to fail 10 of those. If I had one that worked for me and made $5,000 or more a month, I would make all of my money back in 1 month, or maybe just a little longer after other expenses. But the point is, try to find something where you have an advantage. And it may not be something that you're super passionate about in the beginning. I wasn't I didn't go to school for advertising or marketing. Right. If somebody had asked me about it, I would have said, that sounds really boring. I probably would have said, and I ended up falling in love with it. Sometimes I think, just being an entrepreneur, you learn to love your different businesses. I think that kind of tells me that I'm a little bit more of an investor. I think about, listening to stuff years back on like Shark Tank and stuff like that, where people, you look at things by what's the probability that this is going to be successful for me? And how do I do that in a way where I have, the numbers are good? It's a numbers game. That was my approach. That was my edge, was to make it a numbers game. And eventually I would be able to pursue things that I really enjoyed. That's what I would say. Approach entrepreneurship in areas where you think you're going to have that edge. And, it's not to say that people that spend, people that, start up a restaurant or something, spend $250,000 or something on equipment to get everything ready, and permits and all that kind of stuff. It's not to say that it's not going to be successful. It's just know what you're getting into. And, for those people that are on the fence that say, I'm really worried, I can't afford for this to go wrong. This is like, understand there's a way to approach it where, you can throw, you can kind of throw little darts at the board and eventually one of them will hit. And it's a numbers game kind of thing. So that really helped me in the beginning, and that was my edge.
Excellent. Now I have another question for you here. So again, we talked about, you went down this path as an entrepreneur, and you've come out I feel like you've come out to the side now. I consider you a success at this point, and continuing to be a success. So
thank you.
For you and the businesses that you're involved in, what are you looking to accomplish in the next 5 years, the next 10 years overall?
I got into investing because when I had my first tax bill on active income, I was like, wow, they're making more from me than I'm making from me. And so when you look at the tax code in the US, obviously talk to a licensed tax professional. I can't give tax advice. The tax code's written for investors and traders. The government is incentivizing, and you look at real estate too, there's a tremendous amount of tax benefits in real estate. Between taxes and inflation, which is the next thing that I think is very important and relevant in today's situation.
Absolutely.
Is, inflation. So the Fed comes out with this CPI headline number. They say, okay, we have a 3% inflation rate historically. But when you look at it, it doesn't include your food, energy, and housing, which are your three biggest expenses. And when you actually look at the real costs of inflation, you're like 7% minimum historically per year. And then when you think most people work a W-2 job, and in the United States specifically, we haven't had wage growth in the United States in a long, long time. And so most people, if they get a 3% raise, but the inflation rate's 7%, you've got a 3-4% gap. So you're realistically, if you work a W-2 job, if you're not investing, you're losing 10% plus of your money every year. It's just vanishing.
Right. You're still in the hole.
You're still in the hole. Yeah. So, I was thinking about it last night, and I was thinking, our parents' generation would invest with the goal of building wealth in the future, long-term wealth growth. My generation is going to have to invest to just survive
100%.
Because inflation, in my opinion, inflation is going to continue to be a problem for much longer than people think. And I think my generation's been receptive to getting into investing, thanks to YouTube and a lot of investing channels and, podcasts like this. I think just inspiring people to get out there and take action. What I want to get into in the next 5 years, I want to take my investment and trading philosophy, and I actually want to start my own hedge fund.
Nice. Excellent.
And so I luckily have a few contacts that I think are going to be very helpful to do that and go through it's a lot of legal steps. There's a lot of regulatory stuff to go through, and you have to do it by the book. So yeah, in 5 years, that's where I'd like to be. Maybe in like the next 10 years, like I was saying earlier, the charity and the foundation, really focused on being really focused on Appalachian children. Appalachia there is some of the poorest of the poor in the United States, in Appalachia, and you would be floored. My wife is from my wife is from coal mine country in kind of the southern middle part of the state. And when I was first driving out there, when I first drove through, I'd always heard stories of Appalachia dealing with poverty and there's drug epidemics because a lot of the jobs have vanished from that area. When I first drove through there and I just saw the level of poverty, I was just blown away. And I said, I'm going to do something about this. And so next 10 years, I would love to be heavily involved with that family foundation and making sure that we provide educational assistance as well as medical assistance and food as well. Food, believe it or not, there's a lot of parts of Appalachia where children go to bed hungry. And that's all, that's all over the United States. I think people think in America that, America has this reputation being the land of opportunity and access and all of this. And I think people don't realize that extreme poverty is a lot more real and present than it's given credit for. Eventually, where I would like to be, I'd like to kind of expand on that to I again, like I told you, my journey has been about serving others. How do I build up assets, build businesses so that I'm able to have an impact on the world, and my family and legacy and all of that. So I would eventually, I really want to be spending most of my time involved with that foundation and charity work. And eventually I may decide to expand that goal beyond my community to my country. I may enter the political scene in the future.
Wow.
Maybe not as a politician, but maybe for, getting involved with funding of political campaigns that I believe are really representative of the American people. And
well, Phil, honestly, this has been really a revolutionary conversation already for, I'm sure, tons and tons of soon-to-be entrepreneurs and business owners. And so I do want to just start by saying, just thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for joining us here and really letting people sit under this learning tree that you have, really cultivated and planted yourself. So before we wrap up officially here, I wanted to give you the floor for any last-minute notes, anything else that you want to touch on, that you think, this next generation of business owners should know. And of course, any plugs, any shout outs, anything else that you'd like. The floor is officially yours.
I guess first as a shout out, people are going to be asking me specifically about trading strategy, investment strategy, and how I'm able to get these kind of results and what's been working for me. Again, I can't go too much into the detail, but what I can say is, I've been following for the past year or two, I've been heavily following David Sun, who's from the Trade Busters podcast, which is, he's all over Apple and all over Spotify and all the major podcast platforms. And he goes really into his strategy there. So I'll let people check that out if they're interested in what we're doing, what's working for us. I'll definitely let them check him out. And there should be, hopefully, I think there's a link in the description for that. So I'd like to give a shout out and a thank you to him. He's been very helpful in us being able to realize our trading and investment goals. I definitely want to give a shout out to Fund&Grow as well. You guys were incredible to work with. And of course, I appreciate the incredible opportunity to speak here today. And so parting advice I just really want to hammer in, stay on the road, keep walking. You're going to fail. That is normal. You just try to prep yourself. You can't prep yourself for it totally, but try to realize that that's a part of the journey. That's part of what we've signed up for as entrepreneurs. And that's why I think entrepreneurs have such an amazing prize on the other side, that freedom of time, as well as the earning potential of business. So yeah, stay on the road. It's all worth it. It's all worth it. It's the road to freedom.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Again, everyone, this has been Phil Steptoe, philsteptoe.com, www.driprevenue.com. Check him out. Absolute brilliant mind, great entrepreneur, and wonderful to work with here with Fund&Grow. And so I want to say thank you again, Phil, for joining us here. Of course, thanks to all of our listeners here and any other business owners who want to be part of our show. Please reach out to us. We would love to tell your story as well. And thank you all so much for listening and subscribing. And for everybody here, I'm Zach Ritchie. Thank you so much for listening to the Thrive and Prosper podcast. And remember, regardless of what comes in your way, make sure you're always still pursuing your dreams.